The original Red Faction was both critically and commercially successful, and as such, a sequel was inevitable. It features the same engine and the same brand of intense action, but does it do the series justice, or is it just a blatant cash-in? The sequel is only loosely connected to the previous game, as the action takes place on Earth sometime after its predecessor. Chancellor Sopot rules the Commonwealth with an iron fist, and after you and your team prove their worth to him by obtaining an important item, he reminds you why dictators aren't very popular and promptly betrays you all. You then join the Red Faction and go after him. Unfortunately, Red Faction 2 doesn't take its time to develop its world or characters, and as such, even when something important happens, you probably won't care. The terrible dialogue and mostly bad voice acting don't help either. Red Faction 2 is a fast-paced first-person shooter. You have an almost obscene amount of weapons at your disposal, most of which have an alternate fire mode. Enemies are pure cannon fodder, be they human or otherwise, with nothing much in the way of advanced tactics, but the satisfying gunplay and smart encounter design makes up for their stupidity. The most notable addition over its predecessor, however, is the new health system. Not only does health regenerate, but you can also carry free medkits at any time. When your bar is depleted, a health pack is used automatically, which means the cheap deaths are now non-existent. However, you still need to be careful, as manual saving has also been removed and checkpoints are all that's left. Sometimes you won't even have that luxury and will need to restart a mission if you fail. Vehicle sections are also back and are just as fun and empowering as ever, though the bullet sponge bosses you fight late in the game make for some disappointingly generic boss battles. Environmental destruction is also kept to a minimum, which is ironic since you play as a demolitions expert. Besides a few walls that need to be blown up every now and then, progressing is a simple matter of shooting everything until it stops moving. Another new addition is karma. Whenever you complete a secondary or bonus objective, you gain positive karma, and if you fail these or cause unnecessary harm, you get negative karma. However, the only thing this really affects is the game's ending, and since the final cutscene is the same for all endings, save for the narration, it only shows how little effort was put into the story. Red Faction 2 is also somehow graphically inferior to its predecessor. Sure, animation is motion captured this time around, but the characters are so blocky and the textures so blurry, you could be forgiven for thinking this is a game from the 90s instead of 2003, and there is somehow even less environmental destruction than in the last game. Apparently these concessions were made to achieve 60 frames per second on console, but for a PC game, the graphics are simply too basic. Though, if nothing else, the way your enemies are pulverized when directly acquainted to an explosive never gets old. Thankfully, sound is much better thanks to an atmospheric soundtrack and strong sounding guns, but the voice acting and dialogue are rarely anything other than terrible.
Let's get wet and wild.
Sure, you have the likes of Jason Statham,
Don't screw up, Alias. Chancellor Sopot wants, Chancellor Sopot gets.
and Lance Henriksen,
Sopot is broadcasting from the studios upstairs. We kill him and get out fast.
but the writing is terrible and everyone else provides mediocre performances at best. There is multiplayer, but the only option is bot match. The same arsenal is present, but there are also power-ups like invincibility and extra damage to spice things up. The number of maps is staggering and each one feels distinct, owing to some smart design. There are also plenty of modifiers that you can play with before starting a match, and the bots put up a good fight, but the missed potential for a fully fledged online experience is downright depressing, especially since the original had great online features and still has servers as of this writing. Red Faction 2 takes one step forward and two steps back. Cheap deaths are no longer a concern, but the graphics are a downgrade, the story is mediocre at best, and the multiplayer is a wasted opportunity. But the game itself is still fun, as few games offer an arsenal as diverse and satisfying as the one found here. If all you want to do is wreak some havoc, go ahead. But if you want more than that, look for something else.